So I have this secret I'm a little embarrassed about. I am obsessed with ASMR. That's right, those strange videos where someone brushes your hair and pampers you and whispers in your ears about how great you are. But in my defense, my love for ASMR comes from an honest place. As a person who deals with crippling anxiety every now and then, I, like many others, find it gives me some badly needed relief from the worry and overthinking. One of the things I really appreciate about ASMR is just how creative it can be. Of course, you have the classic videos like having your hair cut by an attentive barber, or listening to someone with long nails tap on a phone case. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the types of scenarios and premises that ASMR artists have come up with. Do you want to have your eyes checked by a steampunk optometrist who lives in a cottage in the countryside? That's doable. Do you want to know what it feels like to be an iPad while a mustached man carefully draws on your screen? You got it. Do you want a rude English mason dressed as Lord Farquaad to chisel away at your forehead because you're a statue? Done. Or maybe you want a beautiful blonde android who's working as a space flight attendant to put you in deep cryogenic sleep while explaining the details of your intergalactic space vacation. Yep, ASMR's got you covered. Then there's whatever's going on in this video. But in all seriousness, I genuinely believe in ASMR as a legitimate and valuable art form. I think it's really awesome that the medium has allowed ASMR artists to pour their creativity and love into their craft, and to make something that helps people find some calm and reassurance in a crazy, unpredictable world. Given that there is so much innovation and artistry in the ASMR space, I was surprised to learn that there aren't really any video games explicitly designed to make you experience ASMR. There are some games that people associate with ASMR because they're calming and have relaxing sound designs. Games like Unpacking. In these games, you're usually doing some kind of mundane, repetitive task that gives you a sense of satisfaction. But experiencing ASMR in these games is more of an unintentional byproduct. No, I wanted to play a game that actually gives you those sweet tingles by putting ASMR front and center to the experience, and I simply couldn't find one. So I figured it was up to me to strike out into the unknown and make the world's first true ASMR game. And what do you know? It just so happens that it's coming along quite nicely. I'm calling it ASMR Studio Simulator, and you can wishlist it right now on Steam. In order to simulate something in a game, it's probably best to understand how that thing works in the real world. ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, which is a somewhat nebulous term, but most people agree that it's a pleasant tingling or goosebump sensation you get in response to certain triggering audio or visual stimuli. So let's break down a YouTube video to understand how it triggers ASMR. First, you have what we'll call the model. That's the person or thing that's listening to the ASMR. Then you have the sound source or sources. Oftentimes, it's the whispering mouth of the ASMR artist, or it's something that they're holding in their hands. The types of sounds that trigger ASMR vary wildly, but usually there's some combination of soft, repetitive, soothing, and/or textured. So things like bubble wrap, page flipping, tapping, and scratching. Also, the way the sound sources move across the left and right audio spectrum contributes to the effect. It's believed that this adds an anticipatory element for the listener that magnifies the experience. Now let's make a small prototype in Unity. First, we need a model. I decided to go with a third-person point of view rather than a first-person, because I wanted the player to be able to see the model. This model will have an audio listener on it. Then we need something to act as a sound source in the scene. We'll use a floating orb for that. Now let's record a sound that will trigger ASMR. I like crinkling sounds, so I'm using this old plastic wrap. Okay, let's attach the recorded sound to the orb and see how it does in the scene. You can definitely hear it moving from left to right, which is cool. Now I'm going to make a few tweaks so that it sounds louder when you're close to each of the ears. Cool, I'm actually kind of liking it. It's even starting to give me some of those sweet tingles. Now we'll make another orb so that there's a second sound source to move around. I think it kind of makes sense that each orb will represent each hand of the player. This is what the prototype was looking like after a few months of development. I smoothed out the orb movement so it didn't look and sound so jerky when dragging it around. Then I mirrored the movement between the orbs so they'd both move at the same time. I noticed that most ASMR artists tended to mirror movements between their hands, so this was a simple solution. But you can also just turn one of the orbs off if you don't want to hear them both. Next, I added some audio visualization to the orbs so that you can tell that they're making sound and that they're louder the closer they are to the client's ears. Then this took forever, but I made a playlist system so that the player can automate the entire experience if they want to. So for each ASMR trigger, they can select the type of sound they want from a pool. Then they can adjust the volume of the trigger. Here, they can choose what type of mic the sound is recorded with. On this tab, they can pick what type of movement pattern the orbs will do. For example, clockwise will move the orb around the client's head in the clockwise direction. On this tab, the player can select how quickly the orbs will follow the pattern. And lastly, they can select how long they want each trigger to last before it moves on to the next trigger. Besides that, you can change what the background images and sounds will be. Do you want to relax to the gentle sounds of waves on a tropical beach? Or would you like to fall into a peaceful sleep while looking out over beautiful mountain vistas? I gotcha. I also came up with a new sound source that I'm calling props. These are items that you can interact with in the scene that make ASMR sounds. Scissors are a classic example. I'm a fan of the sound of spray bottles, so here's an example of that as well. At this point, I felt I had a great core mechanic because I suspected that people who enjoy ASMR would really appreciate the idea of being able to completely customize an ASMR session. I also kept falling asleep during testing, which I knew was a good sign. But I realized that this mechanic alone isn't enough to make a full-fledged game out of. I needed to give the player more things to do and to develop a little world and maybe even tell a story. So I did a bit of brainstorming and research about what I liked in other games with similar vibes. I quickly came to the conclusion that this game would almost by default have to be a cozy game. Just like cozy games, ASMR is all about relaxation, de-stressing, and creating a positive atmosphere. And what do you do in a lot of cozy games? You end up farming or managing a shop or living in a cute neighborhood. So I thought it would make sense that if the player is taking on the role of an ASMR artist, then their larger goal would be to open up and run a chill ASMR studio. So that meant I needed to come up with what the interior of an ASMR studio would look like. I decided to go with a 2D isometric perspective because it has a nostalgic, charming look and gives the impression of a 3D game without having to make 3D models. It also gives off Sims and Roller Coaster Tycoon vibes, which are classic simulation games that people are familiar with. In my game, the player will be able to upgrade their studio over time and decorate the space to their liking. I took a bit of time designing cute furniture and items that I thought would be fun to decorate with. This also meant that I'd later have to come up with the shop system for the player to be able to buy more items. But having a shop means there'd have to be some kind of currency in the game. I didn't want to use traditional money because that seemed contradictory to the idea of a stress-free game. So I took some lingo from the ASMR community and decided that the player will earn tingle points when they perform ASMR on the client. They look like these shiny little sparkles. When the player uses props and sounds that the client prefers, they'll earn even more tingle points. Speaking of clients, I thought that collecting more of them would be one of the main goals of running an ASMR studio. So I started making a bunch of different character designs. This is Amy. She's the manager of the cafe next door. She could use some relaxing ASMR to unwind after a long shift. And this is Ethan. He's a vampire who's been really stressed lately because he's going through divorce. So far, I've come up with 25 different clients that you interact with and learn the stories of. They each have their preferred ASMR sounds that they like, and my goal is to make even more of them. This is what the game is currently looking like after a year of development. As you can see, I've done some work on the UI. At the top of the screen, it shows how many tingle points the player has earned and what time of day it is in the studio, which means there's a day and night cycle to show time advancing in the game. Over here is the main menu, and if you click on decorations, you can add a bunch of furniture and items to the studio. I took some time to come up with more things that an ASMR artist would need to run their business. At this point, there isn't functionality to change the layout or color of the furniture, but that's the next thing on my list. The props page is where the player can buy new ASMR props with the tingles they've earned. I've come up with a pretty good amount of them, but I'm gonna make a bunch more. There will also be a lot of in-game achievements and rewards that the player can work towards completing. Then, the events tab will be like a quest log or story log. It will display the tasks and events that happen between working on clients. Then I spent some time creating a bit of a neighborhood around your studio to do some world building. This scene will also allow story and plot points to be conveyed. For example, you may bump into a person walking down the street and they'll end up becoming a client. And of course, we have the most important part, which is the clients page. As you can see, they're all unlocked right now, but it won't start out that way. Some clients will be earned by completing certain story events, and others will be unlocked by running an advertisement, which you can do here. So far, the advertising system is pretty simple. You decide how many Tingle points you want to spend on a campaign, and the more you spend, the more likely you are to get a new client. Then, when you actually click on a client that you'd like to work on, it takes you to this cool little scene where you can interact with them a bit. I spent forever trying to make this feel dynamic by coding a dialogue system and creating a cityscape in the background. This scene also updates depending on what time of day it is. Each time you work on a client, their booking number will progress, and they'll tell you a little bit more about what's going on in their life. I think this little feature adds some more color and dimension to the characters and world. And finally, when you start a session, it will take you to the main mechanic of the game, which is crafting and performing ASMR on your clients. As you can see, I've added some animations to bring the client to life a bit more. And I added stress lines and bags to their face that gradually fade away as they become more relaxed. This is also reflected in the happiness meter, which shows how long until the client is satisfied with their session. I also made some targets that give the player extra points if they hit them with a prop. And if the player moves the orbs long enough, the client will fall asleep and they'll get what I'm calling a tingle path. If the player moves the orbs along the tingle path, they'll get a big bonus to the tingles they earn. The idea is that the player will earn more tingle points the more they interact with the client. But of course, if the player just wants to sit back and relax, they can program their favorite ASMR sounds and the game will take over from there. All in all, I think the game is coming together quite nicely, and I'm going to keep working on it until it's finished. In the meantime, if you're excited about the prospect of a game that lets you customize and listen to endless ASMR while growing a cozy studio in a colorful neighborhood, then go ahead and give ASMR Studio Simulator a wishlist on Steam. There's a link in the description. And if you have any ideas on things you'd like to see in the game, then please let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everyone next time.